Hello, welcome to this webinar. We're looking at writing adoption issues into EHCPs. My name is Shelley Mason, and we'll hopefully really provide you with some tips and guidance into how to make your EHCP effective for your child. I'm going to do this by giving you a quick summary of EHCPs, because I'd imagine if you're watching, then you already have some understanding of EHCPs. I'm then going to focus on the certain sections of the EHCP, and we're going to look at key phrases and the priorities that you need to put in to make sure people are really understanding your child and their information is really valuable in that EHCP. As I said, my name is Shelley Mason. I've worked in special needs education for over 25 years now as a teacher and a manager. I've seen many EHCPs. I have two adopted children. My eldest has an EHCP and has had since year 5, I think, 4 to 5 by the time we actually got it. It wasn't an easy road to get it, and that was some years ago now. She is now at secondary school, and it's it is a valuable document, but does need constantly reviewing and considering to make sure it's describing her and her needs that she has in school. So hopefully we can give you some tips and information for your child. I'm a trainer and advisor for Adoption UK, and independently go into schools and colleges and advise their teachers, mentor their teachers, and so read a lot of EHCPs, and I'm very grateful that I'm able to do that to help education staff understand what our children actually need, whether it's in school or colleges, and how their needs may present in the classroom. I'm also an MBR practitioner. Obviously the challenges of our journey have led me in that direction, and I find MBR extremely beneficial to understand as well. Okay, let's see where we start. So I'm going to whiz. Let's have a little whiz over here. So we're going to be looking at these what to put in this EHCP. We'll start off with a summary and look at those sections. There's quite a lot of words in this webinar, because I want you to be able to pause. I want you to be able to work out what suits your child, because our children are so very different. But hopefully I can give you some tips that you'll be able to really think about the wording and what's going to be suitable for your child. Okay, just to look at the summary. Go through the summary of EHCPs. First of all, I want to give you, we're in 2023, and looking at the national situation for EHCPs, it is very difficult. The growth in children needing EHCPs is substantial across the country. So it's a real challenge for local authorities, and that therefore means it's a real challenge for us to be proactive and fight for what our children need. So do seek support. I think I'll summarise at the end as well. You need to be making sure you're getting as much good solid advice as possible to make sure your EHCP need is recognised by the local authority who hold the legal responsibility, and therefore the school that are bound with delivering that support. Okay, if we have a quick look at the legislation behind EHCPs, as I say, I'm assuming that you already have or are on the path to having an EHCP. 3 aspects: education, health and care. focusing today primarily on the education. If a child's not in education, then it's a little bit more complex as to whether they have an EHCP. Obviously, some of our children will also have health needs. If it's linked to, for example, their FASD, then there may well be health needs that should be detailed on that EHCP as well. And you may be receiving support from the care side of the local authority, whether it's post-adoption support or the 0 to 25 team. So you may have a little bit of information in there about what care is provided, but that isn't an area where there's the complications of getting the timing right. I'm just going to come back on camera as I go through this. So timeframes, you really do need to keep. There are set timeframes for the EHCP process, whether it's the assessment, whether it's the annual review, and so really gain the knowledge, keep the knowledge, do yourself a timeline so you can see what the legal timeframe is, and then keep pushing to make sure that happens. Don't sit back thinking somebody's going to contact you when it's your annual review time. Have it in your calendar. I think, no, I'm going to make sure this happens for my child as the timeframes dictate. You are also entitled to having, before a review, as I said, which happens annually, you should have all documentation 2 weeks before that review to give you time to go through it. If somebody is trying to give it to you 2 days before, then please ask for the meeting to be postponed until you've had time to go through that paperwork. You don't have to be under the pressure of having 2 days. You have enough in your life that you're dealing with if you have a child with additional needs. So make sure you're given the time that you are entitled to. Just to look at the legislation from the school's perspective, that if a child has an EHCP, they are required to deliver the contents of that EHCP. If you're on the pathway to working towards getting an EHCP, then they have to prove that they've already done all they can to meet the needs with the budget they have. So every school has a budget at the moment. It's around £6,000 out of their budget to support a child who has identified additional needs, special educational needs, whatever terminology you wish to use. So school have a commitment. They should be doing that before the EHCP. And then once you have your EHCP, getting that wording right is essential so that you can call on the school, or if the school aren't, then you go to your local authority and say, this isn't being delivered, or this needs to be delivered in a different way. We need to review the wording, and we'll look at how to get that wording right as we go forward. Okay. So just to summarise, there are 5 areas on the EHCP of special educational need: communication and interaction, social, emotional, mental health, sensory and physical, self-help and independence. That one is particularly for older children, year 9 and above, and cognition and learning. So all the information that is in that EHCP will come under one of these headings. Yes, some may cross over, but they will all information will have to sit there somewhere. It can also cover points or areas of learning and development for home, but primarily it is for the education provision, whether that's in school or via alternative provision. Okay. So the way I'm going to move forward now is to look at the individual sections of the EHCP. Now I'm going to do a quick chat about section A, which is your story. Section B is the special educational needs as described or evidenced by professionals. Section E is the outcomes. What are we aiming for? What's this document aiming for? And then section F where that real detail sits. How does this provision, these needs, how are they going to be met in the school or the college? How are they going to be delivered? So we'll start off looking at section A. And here I want to just suggest that it covers the background, the views, the interests, and the aspirations. I want to suggest that you share as you wish, because this is your section where you can give your story of your child. Now that is up to you what you choose to share. We are all different in what we choose to share of our children's stories, but I would suggest that you need to include the information that is going to enhance the reader's understanding, because we are a minority of parents. We think we live in our little bubbles, don't we? And we think that everybody has adopted children, and that's what they're used to, and everyone's used to in life. But actually, we are a minority. And no, not all staff in schools and colleges receive training. It is increasing, but they are not all educated about complex developmental trauma or fetal alcohol syndrome or attachment needs. So what you include in section A, you're using it as a way of helping others understand your child. I find writing headings helpful because it's a bit of a blank section, this one. What do I say? What do I do? What are the significant areas of need for your child? So sometimes some headings, you might take the headings out afterwards, but, just as a guide for when you're initially writing it. In my experience, I've had to put in the most recent. I then realised that I'd missed some history that was actually very relevant. So I think as parents, we're always learning what is affecting our child, what happened in the past that's impacting them now. But try and focus on the most recent. If you present, 10 pages in section A for an EHCP, people won't read it. And the local authority may well send it back to you saying there's too much there, you need to summarise. So think summary, but think essential information. The most recent, if that's what's impacting them in their education now. For one of my children, it was that the last 18 months has been so detrimental to their health, to my daughter's health, that I needed to put that in. I needed to add that. So then I decided to reduce down or summarise some of the earlier information. So write to somebody who doesn't get it. There are many people out there that don't understand the complexity of our children, that don't understand fetal alcohol syndrome. Imagine you just get some key phrases in there to help them understand. There's also the section in A with views and interests and aspirations, and they will ask your child's views, and particularly for older children, then you make sure you've got their views in there, because this document really does or should reflect them. That's section A. Okay, section B. I'm rushing through section A and B, but I would like to really focus on the later sections to help you with those phrases and that understanding. So section B is where I would say the facts section, the needs, strengths and needs, and much of the information in this section comes from professional reports. I should add in there that nowadays the present climate seems to be that the local authority aren't using professional reports or minimal professional reports. So do think about the reports, the information you have on your child, and it might be old, but it could well be relevant. I have heard of some local authorities arguing that they don't want any documents unless they've been assessments been carried out in the last 2 years. I don't think that's relevant for our children. I think you need to argue the case and say, actually, there is substantial historical information here from when my child was very, very young, which is relevant to their development now. So just be prepared. You may face some opposition there, but if you think that report is vital, then use it. I'm going to share a little story for my daughter. When she first had an EHCP, I was very much in the here and now. I was in a mess trying to work it all out. Even though I work in special educational needs, it was a difficult time. And so we got an EHCP. I'm very fortunate to have a very good SEN officer from the local authority to help with that first EHCP. And it wasn't until 2 or 3 years later, during a review, that I suddenly remembered a report I had been given from very, very early days, before my daughter was with me. This was a recognised clinic that had assessed the family, her birth family's behaviour with her. And I just thought, wow, how did I not include this evidence as part of her EHCP? Well, I know what I did, as a new parent. I put it away, put it in a folder and thought, that's fine, that's not going to affect us. We'll carry on, we'll be all right. Little did I know that document was hold such vital information for her long term in the future. So it's now included as a reference in her EHCP. But just a little tip. Think back. Think, what information were you given by social services, and is it relevant for now? Are there any references you need to make in section B, because it would have been written by professionals? So section B gives a list of strengths and needs. As lovely and as important as it is to see strengths of our children, just check that those strengths are truly strengths, because I have read an example here, improvements in, my child has made improvements in writing, for example, with considerable support. Well, is that a strength or is that a need? My child needs considerable support with their writing. As much as we want to see strengths, if they are a need, list them as a need. It's okay just to see a few strengths, but this document is about the need that your child has, the support that they need. Your views are important in this section. So although it needs to be quantified by professionals, and you will, in this section, it's mainly information drawn from professional reports, your views are also vital, because you know your child better than anyone. I would say, if you're on your beginning of your journey of an EHCP and you have any professionals that are writing about your child but have barely met them, be proactive and make sure you share your views and thoughts and give that assessor as much information as you can. And if you feel you receive a report and you don't feel as though it reflects your child, then ask for amendments so that it is truly representing your child. So Section 19, Children and Families Act. Schools must have regard for your views, parents' views. Have regard for means they don't have to actually do it, but they should be listening to you. They should have regard for you and the knowledge of your child. At the bottom of Section B, there is a summary of needs. I would suggest that you prioritise this, get this in the order that you want. What is the most significant need? Is it FASD? Is it social emotional difficulties? Is it a sensory need? And put it in the order that you want. And I say that as a professional. somebody is, if I'm flicking through an EHCP, I personally would look at the summary of needs to give me an immediate understanding, insight rather, not understanding, insight into that child. So if I see it, and we naturally look at where's the priority. So just think about how that's being read and make sure there's information written in there. I've seen EHCPs where there's nothing in that summary of need. Well, then you're required to read the whole document. Somebody interrupts you, your train of thought's gone. You have to come back to it. Whereas if you can keep going to that summary, it just helps you really focus on a child's needs. Okay, hope you find that section helpful. Now, we're going to move now into the section E, outcomes. Now, outcomes are looking at, they're sort of the big heading of what you want your child to achieve. And you do have an opinion in this area. Okay, so it might be that the areas that they need support in is their emotional well-being, could be academic, sensory, regulation, speech and language, physical, trust, transitions. The end is the list rather is quite endless. But just to give you a few examples, and I've highlighted in yellow some key words, some key considerations that many adopted, care experienced, kinship care children have, and these can be their priorities. So the next few slides, whenever you see a yellow highlight, that is to just give you key phrases to think about. Are they suitable for your child? My references are all to Joe. Joe can be male or female, so I'm trying to have some flex there. So it may be for Joe to have increased resilience and reduced anxiety to enable her to feel safe and secure. Now that is one that many of our children need to work towards, feeling safe and secure. And I've added in brackets this SEMH, social, emotional, and mental health, and sensory, because they're the sections of the EHCP that this outcome may link to. So that's just one idea of an outcome. Another one could be emotional well-being, for Joe to have improved emotional well-being so that he can access more learning, thus eventually improving on his attainment. There we're looking at an academic, but the need for the SEMH to be met as well. Outcome 3, for Joe to build trusting relationships with key adults and peers. This can be a big one too. Trusting relationships. Now these outcomes can be written to be achieved in the present key stage that a child is in. They're in key stage 2. It may say these outcomes are going to be achieved by the end of key stage 2. However, it might be your child is nearing the end of key stage 2, and actually these outcomes are an aim for key stage 3 or even key stage 4. So they are long term. I have also seen as well now some EHCPs where there are subsections. So you have the main outcome and then you have subheadings beneath that. So you could have slightly broader outcomes and then break them down as to how they're going to be achieved. Looking at outcome 4 here, for Joe to manage daily changes and transitions with support. Again, that will affect the academic, but also the social emotional as well. And an example in outcome 5, for Joe to access sensory support throughout the school day to maintain regulation. Sensory and physical. So these are quite broad terms. Some other examples there, it may be that your child needs outcomes around social skills, could be specific to maths. It could be accessing the community if they're an older child. It may well be executive functioning. This one does come up increasingly. Excuse me. It could be a sight impairment. It could be to reduce self-harm. So I cannot give you outcomes because they are based specifically on your child, but just take some time to sit back and think, what does my child truly need for the long term? I have come across opposition to change outcomes. Some schools have said that they can only change outcomes with the local authority present at a meeting. However, many local authorities are unable to attend annual reviews nowadays. So you may need to seek further advice on how to do that. But often these outcomes are written for the long term, year 2, 3 years. So we do need to look at how they're going to achieve these outcomes and what support needs to be put in place to do that. Okay, so let's have a look now at some key phrases and priorities. So when we look at the section F, it's all about how are the needs that are written in B are going to be explained. And they need to say who, what, when, and how long in relation to each element that is listed in section B. Each of those needs to have this is what we're going to do to meet our child's needs. They need to be very specific. This is where many EHCPs fall down. It needs to say the 3 times a day. This is just an example. 3 times a day for 15 minutes, one-to-one staff for 10 hours a week, 2 hours a day. Now that information will need to come from a professional report. As a parent, they wouldn't find it acceptable for you to be saying, well, my child needs full-time support every day, including lunchtime and breaks. So the professional reports that we talked about supporting your EHCP are quite vital, because a school will listen to other professionals more than it will listen to parents. That validated information, as I explained earlier. What you don't want your EHC to be saying is your child should have, could have, might have, likes, regular, frequent, or access to. They're very, very woolly statements, and a school does not have to deliver to the level that you may feel your child needs. I mean, regular. If your child has something regularly, that could be once a week. If your child should have access to a TA, maybe that the TA is only in 3 days a week. So we need to get this wording very clear and very concise. The other things we don't want to see is where your views and information are watered down. So if it said parents reports, parent claims, parent thinks, parent believes. Let's try parent knows. Parent has seen that X, Y, and Z is required. You want to be specific. You want to validate your view in the information. So a little idea there. Joe will have, not needs, Joe will have a small pictorial timetable attached to his desk to enable him to know what's happening each day. Brackets are supporting his transitions. It's a fact It's not a woolly, it's a fact. Jo will have. And whenever you see information in your EHCP, think about that. Is this a fact? Is this document telling staff what they will do to support my child? Okay. So let's take a look at these five different areas and unpick some key wording for you to use. Now, as I said earlier, lots of words. I've highlighted it in orange, the subject of that suggestion. Some of these may be completely irrelevant to your children, but hopefully you'll find some and you'll grasp the essential sorts of information we want to be seeing in EHCPs for our adopted and kinship care children. So this section we're looking at social, emotional and mental health. I would say lots of writing, but I'm hoping you can pause your video and take time to pick out the ones that are most relevant to you and adapt them to suit your child. So let's have a read through. Jo will have a set place in class, and you could give more details on that. Jo will have a seat by the teacher or at the back of the room, whatever works for your child, to help him feel safe and secure. So we're being specific. We're saying where we want Jo to sit, and we're saying why. So it's those phrases, safe and secure, as we know our children. Many of our children don't have this instinctively. Jo will be greeted by one of his 3 key staff every morning as he arrives at school. Okay, greeting, being handed from one adult to another, essential for many of our children. That greeting in the morning, that warm, welcoming face can be essential. I have added here 3 key staff. I am a believer that it should be a team that supports a child, not just one key staff, because if that member of staff's off, then our child can struggle. So having an identified team of staff, named team of staff that are accessible can be vital. A similar one there about the morning arrival. Jo will have 5 minutes, a 5-minute check-in every morning when he arrives at school, so that he can share about how he is feeling and have details for his day. That can be a lovely one if your child needs to know about changes, needs some information to be able to sit down and have changes explained. Another one, a similar one, on the focus of that handover in the morning, because it can be so vital. Every morning, Jo will be handed over. Now, I dilemmaed about this phrase. Handed over sounds sort of, I don't know, slightly impersonal, but actually it is literally handing your precious child from you to staff. So think about whether that phrase works for you, handed over to key staff. Again, to feel safe and to feel looked after. All staff in frequent contact with Jo will have completed the virtual school trauma-informed training. This is looking at how you ensure that all the staff working with your child have training. Get it in that EHCP. Nearly all virtual schools in England have access to trauma-informed training, or can access it. I'm sure Adoption UK would help out with that one. I have crossed out here the word frequent, because as I said, frequent could be, it's too vague, it could mean anything, but you want all staff in contact with Jo. All of them. A simple fact there. Okay, looking at some other aspects to social, emotional, mental health. School will take a therapeutic view of Jo's behaviour so as not to incur exclusions for her behaviour. This really is pushing that schools truly understand our children. Again, looking at behaviour. School will liaise with parents about dysregulated behaviours and not impose sanctions in school. It's a big one to think about. How many of our children are not able to regulate through the school day, and then the sanctions just make it worse. So can we get that written in to make schools think about and have a plan so that sanctions aren't imposed? Another one, I would say, these examples are crossing everything from a child that's 5 years old to a child that's 15, 16 years old. So you really do need to think which ones might suit your child. Joe will be permitted to have reminders of his family and home on his desk and constant access to those in his school bag or home box. Reminders of his family. My story there was I used to, have transitional objects, and my daughter had them in the cloakroom in her bag. Well, then for all of her school day, she had nothing to think about and remind her of family and of home. It was pointless being in the cloakroom. She needed them on her desk. She needed to know that she still had connection with us every moment of her school day. I did discover Tesco's did a pencil case that you could get a photograph put on. So she sat with me literally on her pencil case for a couple of years on the desk. I think then she got a bit older and decided she'd had enough of looking at me. But it was very effective for a while. So literally getting those links to home on the desk, in the pocket, and to be permitted by school. By having it written into EHCP, they are having to allow for this to happen. Okay, let's move on to cognition and learning. I say these are a bit wordy. If you need to go and get a cup of tea and come back to it, please do. The benefits of recordings. So cognition and learning. How is your child doing in class? So parents will be notified of any topics that may be challenging for Joe, such as family tree, sex education, prison or refugee-based stories. You will very individualise that on what topics you feel your child may struggle with and what age they are as well. Joe will have small, low arousal class sizes, a maximum of 15. Now, again, that level of fact would need to be verified by a professional. And often if you're looking at maximum of 15, you may be looking at independent schools, specialist settings. You may say just my child needs access to a low arousal space frequently throughout the day. Frequently, too woolly, need to be more specific on that they can access at any point during the day. May have a bit more detail. My child will indicate by showing their hand that they need access to their low arousal space, so that they can access that space constantly by indicating to the teacher. Moving on to the specialist teacher of specific learning difficulties. Anyone that's not familiar with that term, that's dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia. So there are specialist teachers or advisors that go into schools, and you can request, if that's a need, that specialist teacher will advise and provide a programme in the first half term of the academic year and review this every half term. Now, again, that would probably need to come from an educational psychologist report that has identified that there is a specific learning difficulty need. Okay, moving on, adults. Adults working with Joe need to support her expectations and perfectionist tendency and agree a target, e.g. 70% of work is correct. The difficulty that many of our children have. Want things to be perfect all the time. Their expectations on their self or their expectations to be the same as their peers can be really demanding on them and overwhelm them. Jo will be provided with home learning when she is unable to attend school due to high anxiety. If you can see that your child is really struggling to attend, that could be quite vital to ensure that they still have access to some learning. I'm not my daughter doesn't manage to learn at home. School is school and home is home. So this wouldn't be relevant at all for my daughter, but it may suit your child. On the homework subject as well, again there, Jo will not be required to complete homework nor receive sanctions based on incomplete homework. Homework is not a legal requirement, it's a recommendation to develop curriculum-based skills, but some schools may find that one harder to understand, that home needs to be a rest. But if that suits your child, consider having that written in. Jo will, and again, please don't take my advice and say, actually, the lady on the Adoption UK website said this. Your information will often need to be stem from a professional report. I'm not with you, and I don't know your child. But these may be things that you're discussing with an educational psychologist when they're assessing your child, or a school advisor. So do use them as conversation points. Jo will be recognised and praised for his best effort, not completed tasks. That's a nice one to have in there to help teachers understand that best efforts is fine for our children. And that's what we need to work on first. Build their self-confidence. Teachers will not ask Jo to read aloud in class, but Jo may choose to read to his TA or within a small group. That demand, that pressure of reading in front of everybody else, the fear of getting it wrong, may be why that phrase could be suitable for your child. And a nice general statement here, Jo will have a multi-sensory teaching programme focused on developing her executive functioning skills. And that will be taken from, as I said, an EP report. Executive functioning skills, if you haven't been able to look into that, I strongly recommend it. Very insightful as to why so many of our children struggle. Okay, just to show that I'm still here and I'm still a human being, we're now going to look at communication and interaction. I'll keep the screen large so that you are able to copy down any information that you find useful. So Jo will have a small pictorial timetable attached to his desk to show him what is happening each day. Timetables. The anxiety so often is based on the unknown. So if we can give that timetable, if your child wants it, then it can be very useful for them. Social stories and comic strips will be used to support Jo's understanding of social skills and social situations. These will be written in conjunction with and shared with his parents. Use phraseology. Continue to think about how wording things helps Jo. Refer to the following examples. You can reference your speech and language report or your OT report. I can see this has been really difficult for you. Let me help you. I can see you aren't quite ready yet. I wonder if you feel cross at Sue because. So just giving a couple of examples there. All staff will use the PACE model and then use the wording taken from your professional report to extend on that. Don't assume people know what the PACE model is. You may well do, but don't assume that other professionals do. So you'll need to extend just with a summary there. All staff will be aware that Jo's hyperarticulation is an indicator of needing to attach to a key adult or feeling unsafe or overwhelmed. There's something in there about attachment and why they communicate in the way they do. whether it's internalising language or externalised language or behaviours, but try and get something in your EHCP that highlights their attachment needs, should they have any. All staff will be aware that Joe's expressive verbal skills outweigh his language processing speed. How does your child process language? You need to get some information from speech and language report, or possibly an educational psychologist or an OT, but may just be a speech and language report that would highlight that need. Joe will have one-to-one support at all break and lunch times to teach social interaction skills with peers. That may be relevant for your child if you know that lunch and break is a time they struggle with. Okay, communication and interaction. Okay, moving on to sensory and physical, as many of our children have multiple needs in this area. Jo will be able to choose her fidget support tool to have on her desk throughout the day and to choose a new one at break and lunchtime. It's talking about having it on the desk, the need to fidget, and actually that may need a new one at break and lunchtime, an amount of choice as well. Jo will not be required to attend assemblies when he finds it overwhelming. Many schools don't consider how noisy assemblies are and the pressure to sit still for that length of time can just be overwhelming for them. When he cannot, he will be provided with the information about the key topics covered. So you're not suggesting they miss out on the information. Here you're requesting that they don't have to go through that sensory experience of overwhelm. Jo will have 3 planned sensory breaks per day, morning, lunch, mid-afternoon. It's about them being planned sensory breaks. That's not saying that the whole class doesn't have a planned sensory break, but you're saying that Jo needs it. Sort of wonderful if all schools could include the sensory breaks that were suitable for a variety of children's sensory needs. Going into my dream world there. I'd say dream world. My eldest is now at a school that really does understand the needs of our children, which is fantastic. Most of the time, I should add, there's always hurdles to overcome. The sensory breaks. These will include resistance work as directed by the OT and be with a consistent staff member or his one-to-one staff. Don't assume that sensory breaks are something that children can do on their own, because they often can't and will dip out. Jo will learn in a low arousal setting. Again, looking at the sensory needs. Jo will have access to a quiet space that she can access as soon as the classroom is overwhelming her. Now, with that, you might want to state exactly where it is as well. And you may extend it further and say how Jo will be supported to identify and practice going to that quiet space when they're not overwhelmed. That would be wonderful to see written in. Jo will have access to a quiet space to eat his lunch with a maximum of 3 other children. So really they're looking at how the lunchtime can be too noisy and overwhelming. The child may have concerns around food. They may have AFRID and be very selective about their food. How can that need be met? How can the quiet space help in their eating? My daughter spent many weeks, months, having her lunch with the headmistress. She couldn't cope in the lunch area. Thankfully, the headmistress had begun to understand her needs and would keep her lunch there, and joked about the fact she sometimes just wanted to eat it. Back to Jo. Jo will be assessed for exam access arrangements. This is for older children, and be notified of the outcome of that assessment 3 months before her first exam. to make sure access arrangements for GCSEs, for example, aren't just suddenly introduced at the last minute. Jo will be notified by key staff of any change of room or space 10 minutes before and have a timer to show that countdown. So if going between lessons, maybe your child needs a clear indicator, 10 minutes processing time. So actually, I'm going to move classrooms in a minute, or I'm going to go to the assembly in 10 minutes. I'm going to go to break in 10 minutes time, just to help them process. Some of our children need a long time. So changing rooms, transitions can be tricky. Jo will be permitted to wear her sports kit on PE days and not required to change with other children. Some children, this can be quite essential. And yes, schools should make allowances for sensory needs or a child that struggles to change in front of other children. Now, you would possibly need a report that, or a summary, not detail, of why a child can't change, but it shouldn't take much explanation for a school to understand that need. Staff will notify parents of any staff changes as soon as reasonably possible. This is essential for any staff that are leaving. Our children's difficulties with loss are significant. So it can be very helpful to have something in there around staff changes or staff leaving. Okay, moving on to self-help and independence. And I said this is age dependent. You'll find a little bit of information further on just about preparing for adulthood. But some ideas around things for older children. Staff will check in with Jo at the start of a task to check that she understands what she has to do. Understand that she may not ask for help independently. This is when we're expecting children to be working more independently in the classroom. Jo will receive an enhanced supported transition to his next major school or college change, working closely with Dad and Jo. This will include weekly visits in the last half term with either his dad or key school staff. I strongly recommend enhanced supported transitions with details of what is actually going to be done to make it an enhanced supported transition. Jo will be assessed for transport to his new school or college in the summer term, and parents will liaise with the school transport team. So schools don't arrange transport, it's a transport team, but actually you can have it details, and you could extend the details of what does my child need in transport? What works for them? Do they need to meet the staff beforehand? And things like that. So do get it written into your EHCP, but transport can be a good subject to have in there. Jo will access the local shop with his peers and use his bank card within a £5 limit. Now, this is one that you as parents may be working on at home. Jo will be provided with photographs of any new places to be visited 1 week before, and they will be shared with home to reduce her anxiety. And that's around visiting new places and any activities outside of school. Jo will have 30 minutes per week to talk with a key, consistent adult to discuss strategies that she can then use in the classroom and at home. Key, consistent adult, time to talk. Jo will be observed every lunchtime and encouraged to eat a balanced meal. This will not be pressurised, and reduced eating will be reported home that day if your child has any difficulties with eating. Jo will have 1 hour travel training per week to build her confidence in the community and develop her independence to travel to college or work. Whether a school can provide that or whether they need to liaise with the local authority for the 0 to 25 team to provide that is another question. But you're looking at transitioning to out of school. Maybe your child needs some support with that. So do inquire, ask some questions. Okay. So they're the key 5 areas. Now I just want to, as I mentioned earlier, have let's come back on for a minute, a very quick mention before we go about the PFA. So this is for older children preparing for adulthood. Now, from year 9, your child will be encouraged to attend an EHCP or a part of the review meeting. And these 4 areas are part of the Preparing for Adulthood framework. And I'm going to recommend the Council for Disabled Children links, because we could have another whole hour on this, and we certainly haven't got time for that. So just to give you an idea of what you will find on their website, there are different sections. I'll just highlight one here for you. So employment and independent living, and they're great documents because they give examples of what your child could be looking at in Key Stage 3 and 4 and some suggested outcomes. So fantastic information there. And the next one is, sorry, just clicking away here, community inclusion and health. So again, just the really good things to consider for your child. So not directly linked to our adopted children, kinship care children, but can be very useful link for EHCPs looking at year 9 and above. Okay, so just to summarise, I've thrown a lot of information at there. I hope you can pause, use some of the terms, understand the key aspects that are so important for our children. You know your child. You are the main person in their life. You just know them more than anyone else. Any other person involved in this EHCP process, you know them best. And remember that. Local authorities may require evidence of needs, but they may not provide it themselves. This is the challenge we're facing now. They may not be doing any assessments. So the onus has been put on us as parents, which is a challenge. So do think back to reports you previously had, assessments previously had, or just maybe priorities. What do I think is the most key? Can I afford to look at an educational psychologist report? They are very valuable, and they will support your child's learning for years to come, if you can look at any reports yourself. I found them very insightful over the years. Local authorities are required to have regard for the views of the child and parents. So just bear that in mind. They do have to listen to us, and it's in the Children and Families Act 2014. Do feel free. Section 19. Tell them about Section 19. Just remind them. Use terminology from professional reports, as I mentioned earlier. Seek help. Don't try and do this all on your own. It is challenging. So much to think about. We question ourselves, and we have to be constantly proactive these days. And that's tiring. So I have some references a moment for you, places you can go to for help. You are the key to knowing your child. You are also a minority, so need to help others understand the complex needs of your child. Let's see this as an opportunity to get the right information on this EHCP and educate others into the complex traumas that our children have been through. Be key. You can make changes, not just for your child, but for all the professionals out there. Okay, just some further reading for you. As I said, do ask for help. Get help with this. It feels like a very big job. Take it a bit at a time. IPSE, Independent Provider of Specialist Education, have fantastic legal advice so that you know where you stand with things. SOS exclamation mark SEN have fantastic helplines, wonderful documents. They're a charity. They have a document called Weasel Words for EHCPs. I think it costs about £2 or something. Might be a bit more now. But great at giving some indicators as to the words you want to find in your EHCP. that will really make it concrete. Say the Council for Disabled Children have great examples on not just the PFA, but on how to write or go through annual reviews. So I do recommend them. And your local SEND-IAS or equivalent service may well be able to advise you, and your local virtual school may as well, although often they can only provide advice and guidance as opposed to direct support. But if you're struggling, do contact them. Okay, thank you for listening. I've thrown an awful lot of information at you there. I hope there's enough for you to find and utilise. Good luck with your journey. It will be worthwhile once you get that EHCP, really explaining your child. My name's Shelley Mason. I'm training for Adoption UK and other organisations, schools and colleges. Thank you very much for listening, and good luck with your journey. Thank you.